The winter air of February 1945 clung heavy to the pine forests of Wisconsin. Ice cracked beneath the tires of a U.S. Army convoy as trucks rumbled toward the gates of Camp McCoy, one of the largest prisoner-of-war facilities in America. Inside the covered transports, dozens of Japanese women sat in tense silence. They were nurses, clerks, radio operators, and wives of Imperial naval officers, captured across the Pacific as the tide of war turned irreversibly against Japan. For many, this was their first time seeing America. They had expected to die before surrender, but the collapse of island garrisons, the sinkings of transport ships, and the chaos of evacuations had left them with no choice. Some had been pulled from the wreckage of Saipan. Others had been captured after hospital ships were intercepted. All carried the same dread that captivity at the hands of Americans would be worse than death itself. Among them sat Aiko Tanaka, a 27-year-old former administrative assistant in the Imperial Japanese Navy. She clutched a thin blanket against the cold, though her body shivered less from the winter air and more from the terror of uncertainty. Since childhood, she had been told that Americans were brutal, dishonorable, and merciless. Teachers had described them as monsters who would defile women and laugh while prisoners starved. Propaganda films had shown caricatures of Western decadence, overweight soldiers too weak to fight without machines, lecherous men without honor, women corrupted by consumerism. Now Aiko was in their hands, and every breath of her journey was haunted by those images. The truck jolted to a stop at the camp's perimeter. Searchlights swept across the road, reflecting on barbed wire and guard towers. American sentries with rifles slung across their shoulders watched closely as the women climbed down from the trucks. Many Japanese prisoners kept their eyes fixed on the frozen ground, unwilling to meet the gaze of the supposed barbarians. One nurse whispered a prayer under her breath, another bit her lip until it bled. What met them, however, was not the cruelty they had braced for. The American guards gave curt orders through interpreters, but their tone was more procedural than hostile. "Line up here, follow this way, collect your belongings." The women were herded toward the processing building, a low wooden structure with smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, they were surprised again. Instead of humiliation, they found an organized system. Clerks recorded their names. Doctors gave them cursory medical checks. Each woman received a prisoner uniform, wool skirt, blouse, and sweater, marked PW in large white letters. The fabric was coarse, but warmer and cleaner than the worn clothes many had arrived in. They were issued blankets, shoes, and socks. For women who had lived through months of shortages in Japan, threadbare garments, patched slippers, soap made of ash, these simple items felt impossibly abundant, yet fear remained. "This is only the beginning," whispered Harumi Sato, a 24-year-old nurse captured in Saipan. "They will strip us later. This is the trick before the cruelty." That first night, the prisoners were taken to wooden barracks lined with bunks. Each bunk had clean sheets and a real mattress. A coal stove glowed in the center, throwing off steady heat. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, many women slept without shivering. Still, the rest was uneasy. They lay awake, listening for footsteps, waiting for the punishment they had been promised by their government. At dawn, their expectations seemed fulfilled. The sound of boots echoed outside the barracks, followed by the creak of the door. An American female officer entered, flanked by 2 Red Cross workers. The officer spoke through an interpreter. "Today, you will be escorted to hygiene facilities. You will receive showers, grooming, and medical checks." The words froze the prisoners in place. Grooming. To them, the word carried sinister meaning. They imagined forced head shaving, humiliation, even defilement. Aiko's throat tightened. She remembered stories whispered in Tokyo classrooms that Americans humiliated their captives by stripping away dignity, mocking them until they broke. Surely, this was the moment. The women were lined up and marched to a brick building near the camp hospital. Steam drifted from vents on its roof. Inside, tiled walls gleamed and the air smelled faintly of soap. Showers, real showers. The women hesitated at the threshold. "Go in," ordered a guard through the interpreter. They shuffled forward, eyes wide. Each was handed a towel and, to their astonishment, a bar of Ivory soap. Smooth, fragrant, white. Harumi clutched hers as though it were contraband. She had not seen real soap since 1942. In Japan, civilians scrubbed their skin with sand or rice husks. Soap rations were measured in scraps the size of coins, and here in the hands of an enemy, she held a bar larger than her entire family had seen in years. The showers themselves were private. Curtains hung between stalls, warm water cascaded freely, steady and plentiful. At first, the women stood trembling, waiting for the trick, the laughter, the insults, the guards bursting in to humiliate them. But no one came. Only the steady rhythm of water striking tile. Slowly, hands lifted, soap lathered. For some, tears mixed with suds. One prisoner whispered, "It feels like a dream." When they emerged, wrapped in fresh towels, they expected to be marched back to barracks. Instead, an even stranger sight awaited. In an adjoining room, rows of American women stood beside tables covered in combs, curling irons, nail polish bottles, and lipsticks. They wore simple uniforms and smiled nervously, as if unsure how they would be received. The interpreter explained, "These women are volunteers from the Red Cross and local communities. They will cut your hair, clean your nails, and provide grooming. They believe every woman deserves dignity, even prisoners." The Japanese women gasped audibly. Their worst fear had been head shaving, the symbolic erasure of womanhood. Instead, they were being offered beauty treatments. Aiko's legs felt weak. She whispered, "It must be a trick." But Harumi shook her head, eyes fixed on the lipstick tubes. "No, look at their faces. They are serious." One by one, prisoners were seated in chairs. American beauticians gently brushed their hair, trimmed ends, and styled it into neat waves. Some painted fingernails with soft pink polish. Others handed out magazines, Ladies' Home Journal, Vogue, Harper's Bazaar. Glossy pages filled with images of smiling women in elegant dresses, modern kitchens, and sunlit American suburbs. The shock was profound. Prisoners who had arrived pale and fearful now sat staring at reflections they could hardly recognize. Lipstick, brightened lips once cracked from malnutrition. Polished nails gleamed against wool sleeves. Aiko blinked at the woman in the mirror, herself yet someone she had never seen before. At first, silence hung heavy. Then, hesitantly, someone laughed. Another smiled. The sound spread fragile but real, echoing through the salon. For the American volunteers, it was also a revelation. Many had expected sullen hostility. Instead, they saw shy gratitude, even wonder. A farmer's wife named Ruth whispered to another beautician, "They look like schoolgirls on their first dance." But for the Japanese prisoners, the experience was more than novelty. It was a challenge to everything they believed. They had been told Americans were barbaric, cruel, inhuman. Yet here, enemy women treated them with gentleness. They offered not humiliation, but dignity. That night, back in the barracks, the women spoke in hushed tones. Harumi fingered the pages of Vogue. They live like this, with electric kitchens and closets of dresses. Another whispered, "I thought lipstick was banned in war. They have enough to give it away." Aiko lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The phrase from earlier returned to her. Every woman deserves dignity, even prisoners. She had lived her whole life believing dignity belonged only to loyal subjects of the emperor. Could it be that dignity was something given freely, even to enemies? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing. Whatever awaited them in America, it would not be the nightmare they had imagined. The barbed wire was real, but so was the soap, and perhaps, just perhaps, the lipstick. The beauty salon sessions at Camp McCoy did not fade after that first shocking day. Instead, they became a Saturday ritual, a strange ceremony of contradictions, enemy prisoners receiving the trappings of elegance from the very nation they had been raised to despise. By the third week, anticipation replaced dread. Women who once feared humiliation now whispered eagerly about lipstick shades and nail polish colors. Even those who clung to notions of Japanese pride could not entirely resist the allure. The sight of their own reflections, cleaner and brighter than they had appeared in years, was irresistible. Aiko, who had resisted at first, now looked forward to Saturdays with quiet longing. She remembered Tokyo, where by 1944 even combs were scarce, soap was rationed in crumbs, and women went months without trimming their hair properly. Here she felt shampoo foaming between her fingers, the scent of lavender filling her lungs. The experience was so alien that it sometimes frightened her. "It cannot last," she told herself. "This abundance is temporary. They will take it away." Yet, week after week, it returned. One afternoon, as her nails were being painted pale pink, Aiko asked the American beautician through an interpreter, "Why do you do this? We are your enemies." The woman, a farmer's wife named Ruth, paused only briefly before answering. "Because being a woman doesn't stop during war. Everyone deserves to feel human." The words echoed inside Aiko's mind. To feel human. It was a concept she had never considered in those terms. For years, she had been told her worth was measured by loyalty to the emperor, by sacrifice, by obedience. Humanity was never promised as a right, yet here, in the chair of her captors, she was offered it freely. The magazines distributed during these sessions became treasured contraband. Glossy issues of Ladies' Home Journal and Vogue were traded like currency photographs of smiling American women in dresses, kitchens filled with electric refrigerators, families gathered around radios. It was another world. Harumi traced her finger along the outline of a model in a polka dot dress and whispered, "Is this truly how they live?" The women pored over advertisements with obsessive fascination. One ad displayed 3 brands of soap, each promising softer skin. They stared in disbelief. In Tokyo, they had scrubbed their bodies with sand and rice husks. 3 kinds of soap," Harumi said, shaking her head. 3 kinds, when at home we wash with ash." They collected the magazines, slipping pages beneath mattresses or sewing clippings into the linings of their coats. Each picture was a fragment of an impossible truth. That America lived not in scarcity but in casual, thoughtless abundance. Not all accepted this transformation easily. Some women resisted, clinging to their indoctrination. Michiko, a nurse from Nagasaki, denounced lipstick as a tool of humiliation. She declared that to paint one's face in captivity was dishonorable, a betrayal of purity. Others murmured agreement, fearful of losing what little pride remained. Yet time eroded even their defiance. Michiko, once loud in her protests, began lingering by the mirror after her hair was styled, her fingers grazing the neat curls. One evening, another prisoner caught her secretly rubbing a stolen dab of lipstick across her lips. There were moments of bitterness, too. Some women wept quietly after sessions, torn between delight at their transformation and guilt for enjoying it. "Why do we laugh while our families starve?" one whispered. The conflict between what they were taught to expect and what they actually received gnawed at them constantly. For the American administrators, the Salon was not merely charity, it was strategy. Reports circulated in military channels noting that the female POWs responded positively to gestures of normalcy. The beauty program provides psychological stabilization. One memo read, "Undermining extremist indoctrination more effectively than lectures." The Red Cross volunteers thought less of strategy and more of simple decency. Many had husbands or sons fighting overseas. Some had lost brothers in the Pacific. Yet, here they were, curling the hair of women who, in another context, might have cheered for those very deaths. The contradiction was not lost on them. One beautician confessed in a letter to her sister, "I hated the idea of helping them at first. But then, you sit across from a young girl with cracked lips and calloused hands, and you realize she looks no different from us. They laugh the same. They cry the same. I don't forgive what their country has done, but I can't deny what my heart sees. By summer 1945, the Salon had become more than a ritual of grooming. It was a classroom, a place where indoctrination unraveled. The women began to practice English phrases with their beauticians. "Hello. Thank you, beautiful." They imitated the posture of the models in the magazines, giggling at their own awkwardness. More importantly, they debated among themselves. At night in the barracks, conversations stretched late into the dark. They have so much food, so much soap, so much of everything. Why would they waste it on prisoners? Because they can afford to. We were told they were weak, but if they can give us this, then what must they give their own? If their women lived like this in wartime, what chance did we ever have? These were not idle musings. They were cracks spreading across the foundations of propaganda. The women who once believed America decadent and weak now saw its strength in abundance. Among all the items in the Salon, lipstick emerged as the most powerful symbol. Its small, fragile tube became more than makeup. It was transformation in miniature. Red lips against pale faces told a story the women could not ignore. Dignity survived, even in captivity. Harumi, once skeptical, now carried a tiny stub of lipstick in her pocket. She used it sparingly, a secret ritual before meals. "If America can afford to give lipstick to its enemies," she whispered one night, then Japan never stood a chance. The statement silenced the room, for in those words was a devastating truth. Their nation had been fighting an enemy so wealthy, so resourceful, that even prisoners were treated with more care than civilians in Tokyo. The transformation reached its height in late July. That week, the volunteers brought not just magazines, but a radio. For the first time, the women heard American music, swing tunes, crooners singing about love and longing. The end of July 1945 carried an uneasy stillness inside the camp. Outside, the war was reaching its violent crescendo. Rumors of terrible bombings filtered in through guards and Red Cross staff. The women who had come to anticipate Saturdays at the Salon now felt a tension they could not explain. Something was changing. On August 7th, whispers swept through the camp. Hiroshima had been destroyed by a weapon unlike any other. 2 days later, Nagasaki followed for the Japanese women at Camp McCoy. The news arrived like an earthquake with no ground to stand on. Some collapsed in grief. Michiko, the nurse from Nagasaki, screamed until her voice broke. Others sat silent for hours, staring at the floor. Harumi wrote in her diary, "I painted my lips red this morning. By evening, my city was ash." The Americans did not celebrate within the camp. The Red Cross volunteers, usually cheerful, moved with quiet sympathy. One placed a hand on Aiko's shoulder and said softly, "I'm sorry." Aiko wept not just for the dead, but for the collapse of every illusion she had ever held about Japan's invincibility. The women whispered late into the night, "If they had weapons like this, why did we ever believe we could win?" Their earlier doubts about abundance now merged with the grim reality of atomic power. America's superiority was no longer abstract. It was undeniable, final, and terrifying. The Saturday after Nagasaki, the women hesitated to enter the Salon. Lipsticks seemed obscene when their families were starving under rubble. Yet the American volunteers insisted, urging them gently into the chairs. "This is not about vanity," Ruth, the farmer's wife, said firmly. "It is about dignity." For the first time, the women did not laugh or chatter during the session. They sat solemn, staring at their reflections. Red lips, curled hair, manicured nails, all contrasted cruelly with images of bombed cities in their minds. Still, as Harumi later wrote, the lipstick reminded us that we were alive, that we still had faces to paint, voices to speak, and futures to rebuild. It was not vanity. It was survival, surrender. On August 15th, the Emperor's voice crackled across the radio. For the women of Camp McCoy, many hearing him for the first time, the words confirmed what they already knew. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. Reactions varied. Some collapsed in relief, others in despair. Aiko felt only numbness. "It is finished," she whispered, staring at her hands, still faintly stained with nail polish. That night, Captain Margaret Williams, the American officer overseeing the women's section, gathered them together. Through an interpreter, she addressed them. "You are no longer prisoners of war. You are wards of peace. Soon you will return home. But before you do, remember what you have seen here. Remember not just the war, but the life that is possible beyond it." In the months that followed, the women lived in a strange limbo. They were no longer prisoners, yet not fully free. The Americans extended educational programs, English classes, lessons in nutrition, demonstrations of modern agriculture. The Salon continued, but now framed as a workshop: how to make soap, how to create sanitary practices, how to sustain dignity in scarcity. For many, these lessons felt more valuable than rations. Michiko, once defiant, began taking notes on food preservation methods. Aiko sketched diagrams of plumbing systems, determined to remember how clean water could flow so freely. Harumi copied recipes from magazines, marveling at meals built from ingredients she had never seen in Japan. The salon had become more than a place of grooming. It was a classroom of survival, preparing them for the devastation awaiting back home. Repatriation began in December 1945. When the first group of women boarded transport ships, they carried bundles of personal belongings, extra clothing, and hidden among their possessions, lipsticks, magazines, and bars of soap. These were not luxuries. They were evidence. Proof that the enemy they had been taught to fear had treated them with unexpected humanity. As the ships departed, Aiko stood on deck, clutching a tube of red lipstick. She thought of the Salon, the American women who had styled her hair, the strange phrase that had changed everything. Every woman deserves dignity, even prisoners. She did not know what awaited her in Japan, but she knew this. The war had ended, but what she carried home was more than survival. It was a truth no propaganda could erase, that dignity, like lipstick, could be freely given, even to enemies. Thank you for following this powerful story of unexpected humanity in wartime. If this journey moved you, please subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from history. Leave a like if this narrative resonated with you, and share it with others who appreciate remarkable tales of compassion across enemy lines. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories to light. See you in the next episode.